Hello everybody and welcome back to the Two Norries podcast. I am your host James and I'm joined by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hi everyone.
Ron is on the deck. Say hi Ron.
Hi Ron.
And this week we have an American on the podcast. It's going to be like listening to the television. Ellen Groble, thank you first of all for contacting us through email, making yourself known. You're a 29-year-old lady from Chicago, the Windy City, that lives in Maynooth, and you are a counsellor, a therapist. Before we get into all that, let's go way back. Who are you and where are you from for the people that don't know you?
Sorry?
Who are you and where are you from for the people that don't know you? Maybe where you grew up.
My name's Ellen Groble. I grew up in a suburb outside of Chicago. First moved to Ireland in 2012, so I've been here a good bit of time. Psychotherapist, I'm working in Dublin. I specialize in a lot of work around masculinity, working with men and women and non-binary people around body image, things like that. Big one for me, shame and emotional expression too. Yeah.
Massive thing for me as well as the shame thing. It's just, and sometimes people that have a lot of shame within them, they don't understand it. They don't even know it's shame. A lot of people, because they haven't researched it or gone to somebody to talk about it, but they also don't know where it came from. And I'm hoping that we can start talking about a lot of that intergenerational shame, how it is passed on through generations as well.
Yeah.
You know, in time. But we'll go back to maybe the start. You know, and what brought you to Ireland initially?
I think initially, I was so young. I was looking for a place to go on Erasmus. Looked cool, looked interesting, looked fun. Came over.
Can you explain Erasmus? Because a lot of people won't know what that is.
Oh, right. Okay. We call it in the States, we call it study abroad.
Yeah.
Basically, it is just I had the opportunity to study somewhere else for a while.
Yeah.
I wanted to go somewhere new, somewhere different, English speaking. Came here, kind of fell in love with a lot of different things about it and stuck.
Have you any family connections to Ireland?
I do in the way that every American probably tells you they do, my great-great-great-grandfather
was on the coffin ships and came through Ellis Island.
So in that way, but not close enough to be.
That's a massive thing. When you go to Blarney, when all the American tourists come in and they start, the Blarney Stone. If I kiss this is going to happen.
Give to the gab.
Like we'd be out there. We were in Blarney as kids when all the Americans used to be coming throwing their money into the wishing wells, thinking that their wishes, we'd be inside there with no shoes on, picking all the money out of the fucking well. It was great back then.
But you know, when you're looking at the Americans coming to the likes of Blarney and all, we think like, what do they see in it? But you know what I think? What I learned later is, like in Ireland, we've a lot of medieval castles and we've got drawbridges and very old city walls and don't have that kind of history in America, because obviously America's a relatively new country for white people. Yeah. Obviously there was a lot of Native Americans there before, you know, so I think that might be the draw.
Yeah.
But look, we digress. What's the most pressing issue? We might as well go straight into it. What's the most pressing issue for males attending your service?
Do you know, I'm going to pick on it because I know you mentioned it a second ago there, but shame is such a big topic. And I think, in my personal opinion, it connects to so many different things that almost always, no matter who I meet with, we'll talk about it at some point. Whether it's the presenting issue someone comes in with or somewhere down the way we'll find it kind of hiding in a corner or something. But I think it's a big piece of it.
Would shame be like an umbrella term for like somebody that's embarrassed or maybe they find it hard to disclose stuff to you because, you know, would it be like that?
Well, I'll tell you the definition of shame that I was kind of taught. So this is my language around it. People can change the word, they can use it. But the way that I was kind of taught and how I often use it in my work is guilt is I've done something bad. Shame is I am something bad. So the concept being when I'm guilty of something, right? I feel bad and it's a functional feeling. It's actually good in certain occasions to feel guilt, right? If I'm flailing my arms around now and I smash this microphone, I feel guilty. And that teaches me something, right? I want to be more conscious of how I move my body. Yeah. I want to be more thoughtful of your equipment and what you guys do. If I feel shame instead of any of that, I knock this over and I go, God, I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid. I've annoyed them. They're going to hate me now. Do you know what? Maybe I'll just leave. Maybe I leave. Maybe I respond sort of erratically or whatever else. But the point is, and what I usually talk to people about is, it's about me. And because that's such a strong feeling, I don't actually learn anything from it. And at best, usually it's paralyzing,
Yes.
right? So if that all happened now, I don't actually think, oh yeah, do you know what? I should be more conscious of how I'm sitting. I'm off on this. They must hate me. They must be judging me. Maybe, you know, I leave, you message me and you go, hey, are you all right? I'm like, I'm just not even going to respond to them because I can't believe how much I've embarrassed myself. It goes on its way.
And it's all the person themselves working. Nobody thinks nothing. It's just innate. It's built in. It's within here, and it's like you could have done absolutely nothing wrong, and this thing will come at you like a ton of bricks, and you'll freeze. It's like you lose your breath. You know, and there was a few books that I would have read, you know, Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. I would have touched off bits and pieces of that, and I would have looked into what toxic shame was and healthy shame. And the healthy shame is simple stuff that people have, but a lot of us would have the toxic shame as well, which can really, really cripple a person and stop them from really moving on in life, you know, in a number of different ways, because it's just, the feeling of it is so strong. It just knocks everything back. It stops them from becoming that person that they should be. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that shame can be passed on from different people in family, say a mother to a son, a father to a son, or the whole way it goes through? Can you speak a little bit how it happens in a family home, or maybe in a school, or whatever it may be?
So there's so many different ways I think that it can find its way into our lives. Transgenerational trauma, such a big topic and point of research. And there are so many components to that too. Some are hereditary, right? Like genetic things that change in our makeup. Other things being connected to even how my family talks about a topic, right? So if I have transgenerational trauma around like scarcity of a particular resource, and how does my family relate around food, around money, things like that, can be so subtle, right? And how they get kind of placed in the home. But now all of a sudden we're talking about money, we're talking about food, but it's actually about who I am, and am I caring for my family? Am I protecting my family? A big thing I see often when I work with people too is learned language from our families. The number of times that I talk to people and, you know, they'll be saying something really, really horrendous about themselves. And I'll say, like, where have you heard that before? Because no baby is born saying, I hate myself, I'm a bad person. It comes from somewhere. We learn that language from somewhere. And whether it's family members, whether it's in school, whether it's media, whatever else, it's learned. And I think especially when you're really, really young, you don't have the ability, you don't have the like developed brain to be able to separate yourself from that. So it becomes, this is how people talk about themselves. So I talk about myself.
It's my understanding that this country, right, and countries that were ran by different Catholic orders back in the day, okay, because it's different now, they would have done more damage to people, I think, than any with themselves, because what they had done was something that the parents and the grandparents would have passed on to the kids and the kids, you know. So have you done any work around, say, what the church in Ireland have done in terms of shame down through the years?
I think it's a really interesting topic because, again, as you're talking about it, sort of separating the religion from the institution around the religion, and how shame is often used for people too as a tool of power. If you feel shame, again, we were talking about that paralyzing before, it's very easy for me to talk you into things. Because if you say you're a really bad person and I say, oh, great, here's something that you could do to become a good person, like who wouldn't crave that? I've been feeling so horrible and someone's told me I could change that. And going back to, you know, talking about just learned shame too, around like the concept of original sin.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that's talked about is kind of you're inherently on this earth and you have sinned. And again, how that's talked about in different sects of Catholicism looks different. But a lot of that sort of you are good or you are bad, right? You're going to heaven or you're going to hell doesn't leave much space. So oftentimes for people, if I feel like I'm destined for hell, it doesn't feel like I can get into heaven. So why would I try?
Yeah.
Right. And it's really, really hard to get out of that place. I think talking to people and opening it up to say like, yeah, you can do things that you don't like, but you can change. There is space there where you can do things differently. I think we get that on a cognitive level. Yeah. Understanding that emotionally is a totally different conversation.
Yeah. How do you help somebody that has shame and they're, I don't know, you're probably aware of the concept of the inner critic.
Yeah.
No, so the part of the mind that's negative, what's the opposite to an affirmation? Negative self-talk. How do you help somebody to come through that? So, like, what are the steps people can take?
Yeah.
What does it look like working with somebody that has a strong inner critic?
First step, always noticing it. I think that's actually something that is harder than we think it is. Noticing that I'm doing that, right? And noticing, I oftentimes ask people like and I make them like say out loud to me what you're saying to yourself, right? Or write it down. Because in our heads, we're going, oh yeah, I'm a bit tough on myself. And then when someone writes it on paper, saying I'm a horrible person, right? Or I'm saying I'm bad, I'm inherently bad. That's pretty strong language. But when it's in our own head, we go, oh, I'm being a bit tough on myself. So much more than that. So I think noticing it is a huge step. In my dream therapy world, we can start immediately responding with some positivity for most people. It's similar to the, oh, are you depressed? Go for a run, right? Of like, how do you want me to get there? My style of work has often been described as direct and irreverent. And I think different therapists practice this different ways. For me, most of the time, when people are caught in that trap of, am I a good person? Am I a bad person? I'm not God, so I don't care. Yeah. I actually don't need you to find that out. I don't care. It's not our problem right now. We're talking about changing a behavior or changing a thing that you're doing or not doing. How do we do that? If that inner critic comes in, I just want to say like, all right, cool. You think I'm a bad person? Great. I want to try to do this thing that I've been struggling with. I think that's so much more accessible for people to be neutral about themselves or just pause that and just get it out of the way rather than getting rid of it, because usually these things have been built up over years and years and years. And if we've been doing that since we were children, and I say, that's not very nice, you can't remove it overnight. So I think it's a lot more.
Yeah, and you know, people in early recovery, like think of my own experience of having a very strong inner critic through early years, through addiction, where your self-esteem is very low and your confidence and you're doing things that bring a lot of shame and guilt. The critic, you're bad, you're terrible, how could you have done this and all this. Then in early recovery, if you listen to that part of your mind, you'll never do nothing with your life because you're not good enough, so why would you try? But when you're in early recovery or when you're trying to rebuild your life, it doesn't have to be addiction, it can be recovering from anything, recovering from mental health or breakups or job loss or some dark period in your life. You like, you're not going to get rid of the inner critic, but I found that the more you acknowledge it and do what you wanted to do anyway, the more control you get over it. And like, even in my best days, I still have that inner critic. It's just I have more control over it, and it's there, but it's very, it's not as loud. It's but when times, under stressful times get tough, then it gets amplified again, you know. So like, you're right when you said like it doesn't disappear. It's just you have to acknowledge it. It's there and still kind of drive on, as we say in Ireland, you know. The book that Timmy mentioned last time, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, is a bit of that. Like, it's like, yeah, it's there, but it doesn't have to control your life.
And I suppose going back to that book, like, you don't even have to read the book, just read the title and live off that. But before we kind of progress into a lot of other stuff, I just, you know, people that have been abused sexually or whatever, a lot of them, people go through their lives in complete shame, believing that they've done something wrong because of different forms of shame. Why has abuse is such a hold over people in that area around shame.
Mm-hmm. So I'll speak to, I know you mentioned when people are younger.
Yeah.
This can happen obviously when someone's at any age as well. But especially when we're younger, when you're like talking like 5, 6, 7, developmentally where your brain is, you actually can't even really understand other perspectives. So right now, you know, if they said, oh, what does James see? And I was a child, I'd say, James sees the same thing I see. And you say, oh, but James is sitting somewhere else. And I'm like, yeah. And so James sees this. We can't understand other perspectives. So what happens when our brain is at that stage and basically a bad thing happens is my brain goes, there's a reason why a bad thing happens. All I sort of have in front of me is me. So I need to solve this problem because I don't want a bad thing to happen again. So it must have been my fault. I must have done something wrong. And in a way, obviously on the surface, it sounds so cruel. But in the way, it's a child's mind trying to cope with a bad thing. I want that to not happen again. How do I soothe myself by saying, yeah, there's actually rules and a system and you can guarantee this doesn't happen again if you just
shut off. Shut off as in like emotionally completely shut off because that would have happened in my own life. Complete shut off. And but there was still no as I kind of developed then and got older and older, there was no understanding of where that stuff even it just came from, you know. It's the same as for men and women that are gay, you know, particularly men. And it's so difficult for men to come out because of the society, because of the way society looks at men that are gay or women that are gay. And the shame that it is kind of is carried on from maybe the church years and years ago, like where to be homosexual was
a crime up until
the worst
the 90s.
thing ever, you know. Yeah. So that kind of shame, it does be carried on, and even a lot of men that are married and stuff are living their lives as in, and they're gay, and it's very, very sad.
Did you know there's a term now called men who have sex with men? I only heard that recently. So it's like, now you can explain this probably better than me, but in my understanding as these can be men that have girlfriends, wives, or might be single, but they happen to just have sex with men, but they wouldn't be class themselves as gay. Is that correct?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask and obviously their own sort of identification with it. I know it from a sort of psychological and research perspective because I had friends that worked in inner city Chicago doing a lot of HIV and AIDS testing. And what they found was it was really, really difficult to get some of the people they wanted tested and treated because people were very, very hesitant to say, I'm gay. And part of that is their own identity. Part of that, right, is the internalized homophobia, external homophobia, and all of that. But what it meant was people were getting not able to access the care that they needed and wanted. And once they can open that up to people, and even if people don't know themselves, but I don't know how I label myself. I don't know what any of this means, but I do know that I have slept with a man at whatever point and I want to get tested for this thing. It just opens up the door to people. And I think the more and more you can just open up space, because for someone offering treatment, like, I don't care whether you will say to me that you identify as gay or not. I just want you to get what you need. Yeah.
The help that you need. Yeah. I think we
interesting, isn't it?
Covered the shame area. There was a lot went on there for a long time.
Well, I'd say no matter what we bring up here, like one of the things I wanted to ask about was body image, because you said in your emails, you know, this the people are presenting with that. There's a lot of shame around that too. Do you think that, like, the obvious thing here is social media is pressure? Would you agree with that?
Social media is a huge pressure, I think. I think especially too, because I've always been working a lot with body image issues, disordered eating, things like that. And historically, it affected women significantly more than men. Unfortunately, men are catching up. And it's getting quite close at this point. And I think social media is a big part of that. Everyone kind of feels more pressure to look a certain way or act a certain way. Obviously, there's so much editing on social media and all of that too. What's also happening, which is a good thing too is we're increasing our awareness of what disordered eating looks like. So a lot of times people don't know to the definition of anorexia being restrictive and bulimia being binging and restricting. Bulimia also includes if I go to the gym excessively in response to eating whatever at a certain day, that counts as bulimia.
Eating an apple and doing 100 burpees afterwards. You know?
Yeah. And people people have these kind of, preconceived ideas of what bulimia means or whatever else. So there's actually a lot more people being included now that weren't before, that were engaging in disordered eating behaviors. It just wasn't labeled at that at the time. So.
Even in my own experience of, going through health and fitness and different stages, I always found calorie counting to be very... I'd get a week or two out of it. I might even get a month out of it, where I have my goals and I have my macros, my micronutrients, and I have my proteins, fats and carbohydrates, and I feel great. My body composition starts to change and I feel more confident. But it becomes so restrictive and becomes so obsessive then that it ends with a binge and a blowout for about a week where you just stuff your face with shit, and then that shame comes back and the guilt of all that hard work and effort. And you just saw some people the calorie counting works from, but it can be a trigger for others, and anybody going. And we've covered eating disorders on this podcast a few times, but one of the topics we haven't covered was overeating, and you don't have to be a huge person to be an overeater, and you can have it in stages at certain points for you. And another thing what people might be aware of is Overeaters Anonymous isn't a room full of big people. Overeaters Anonymous is there for undereaters too. It's there for bulimia, anybody that have issues with food. Have you got a lot of people coming to you for that? And is there men coming to you for eating disorders?
Yes. And I think something that's interesting too, just sort of in the context of, so I've worked in these areas for years and years and years. Oftentimes, disordered eating and body image issues are connected to other things in our life. So a lot of times it can be an avenue through which we feel control in our lives or through which we feel good about ourselves or whatever else. And when the pandemic started and when lockdown started, I heard from so many people that I worked with years and years and years ago. And a lot of the things they'd experienced before had come back. And it's a huge avenue for people to regulate, to control themselves, right? And to feel in control. And obviously a lockdown is a place where we all felt a lack of control.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's one place for a lot of people. It shows up, right? And whether that's control in the cycles you mentioned, right? I'm overeating and then I'm responding to that and I'm overeating, whether it's restricting or whatever else, in a lot of different ways. I think lockdown should have.
In the quiet space of the lockdown where you're at home, you've no activities because everything is closed, work, the whole lot. I think whenever the quiet space comes, the shit comes at you.
Yeah.
And we spoke numerous occasions about men in the construction industry, how a lot of them would have struggled with their mental health because being active and using their hands and being busy and flying here and flying there kept them out of their heads. Then they were having their few pints in the evening or going to the gym. Everything was locked. Every single thing was locked. And men struggled, and women massively as well, But before we started the interview, we were chatting and we were talking about body image, okay, in a different way, okay. And for example, you look at me, I have tattoos, and years ago I would have been involved, I would have took steroids to be muscular and all these different things, And looking at myself now today, I understand why I built up that little bit of an image for myself, because it was like to say, hold up there, stay away, that cunt is mad, stay away from him, he's fucking big and he's tattoos. And, we all had that description of someone with tattoos years ago. Oh, he's a criminal, he has to be in the prison, don't go near him, he's mad. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why particularly men build themselves up with muscles and tattoos and just to give off that kind of image? Can you tell us a little bit what's behind that?
Yeah. Well, first off, obviously, there's no correct or incorrect way to look. And if people find things that suit them and suit their personality, fantastic. Usually what I get curious about when I'm talking to people, and particularly men, about this is just if we pulled that out, right? If I could remove your tattoos right now magically, if that would sort of pull the rug out from under me and destroy everything, then it's something to look at. Yeah. If it's, do you know what? I really like this. It's a form of expression in art. Fantastic. And I just want us to kind of explore those when I'm talking to people about what are the things that I'm holding here because they need to be here. And that's always something to kind of explore, especially for, as you're talking about, with men and masculinity, and sort of the idea of like what it means to be a man, right? Obviously, you guys have a different experience than I do, but oftentimes when I talk to men about this, so much of it is like this concept of toughness, right? And strength. And this sort of idea that that's what I'm supposed to be. And obviously, when I talk to people about this, I have my own opinions on what strength means, what toughness means. But we kind of have this stereotype in society that you have to look a certain way. You have to come off in a way that people are hesitant to approach you, right? And that means I'm strong. That means people leave me alone. It's a very protective way to live as well, because I can kind of keep people at a distance. Yeah. And if they get too close, I can spook them away again. Yeah,
that was the whole theory of the muscles and the tattoos. It was to keep people away because of my own development wasn't there. I wasn't after developing. I was still a child within a man's body, you know, just trying to cope and manage. And I built up these different forms of, these different things, the muscles and everything else, just, so it was kind of like, I wouldn't be attacked, you know, but if someone had said boo, you know, and bullying would have been a massive part of why I kind of turned out to be like this, from being bullied as a young child. And that's my kind of understanding, and it was a great point that you made there at the start. Some people just like being unique, and it mightn't be anything behind the way they look. But for me, I look back at my life now, and it was definitely the muscles and the tattoos were there, because growing up, I looked at people with tattoos, and there was people they were feared. And fellas with muscles were, oh, stay away, he's big, he'll fucking rip your head off. And that was my whole, that was why, these were my reasons for the way I looked. No, it's not like that. No, I know I can just be myself, you know, and, which is great, you know, and I just want to look the way I want to look because it makes me feel good. I like feeling fit, and I like art because now I look at my tattoos and they represent the stage of my life where I look at them and, oh yeah, I have the gladiator. That's the period of my life where I was really, really fighting through life, and it was a bit of a struggle. And then I have a lot of mad shit on my back, and it was like going through the period where I wanted to be a fucking gangster. Yeah. You know, all that kind of mad shit. So, they remind me of something. Then I'd have this here, went through a period of my life where I was struggling mentally. And Dr. Joe Dispenza came into my life, and I started using his work to try to understand my thoughts and the emotions and stuff, you know. So it's people wear these different masks to get away from something, but behind the mask there is the calmness and everything else. What's your understanding of that?
Yeah, I think
there's a lot said.
No. One of the things that actually interests me the most behind all of that is, I know we're talking about the kind of appearance aspect, right, of that sort of toughness and what that means. But I think another big piece of this whole idea of masculinity and being a man that I talk to a lot of people about is mentally and emotionally, what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to feel. And now this is a vast generalization. I know it's more complex than this, but oftentimes I'll talk to clients about the fact that for men, you're kind of offered emotionally, you can be angry or you can be grand. Those are your two options. And if you don't pick one of those, too bad, find a way to fit it into one of those. Obviously, men are humans, so unfortunately, you feel more than just those two things. And what can happen over time is when I get so trained into those are the only two things that I'm allowed, all those other things get kind of pushed in the corner. And a lot of people get to the point where I'll talk to a lot of clients and I'll say, how are you feeling? And they say, I don't know. I feel a thing, but I actually don't know the name for it. And I have these things, I don't know if you're familiar, if you've seen before, emotion wheels.
Yeah.
It's a wheel of, are you familiar with it? Have you seen it before?
I've seen it.
Okay, yeah. It sort of starts out, the center of it is those base emotions, anger, sadness, and it kind of branches out from that, a more complex emotions, right? I feel disappointed, I feel frustrated. And I offer those to people often because sometimes we just don't have the language. Right, I feel a thing, but angry feels too strong.
Yeah.
But I don't feel nothing. And oftentimes we can feel the pressure to dismiss that, then, oh, I'm fine. Right? Like, oh, it doesn't really matter. And if we can open up some space to just kind of like get curious about your own mind, there's more in there. And we get to kind of explore that and learn more about that. And I think besides just knowing yourself better, because that's nice, it helps me sort of learn how I'm in the world, right? How I'm living, what I feel, what I need, what I want to ask for. It takes knowing like what's going on in my head.
And not everybody has that emotional intelligence, not able to put names on emotions, or they might feel a certain way, they might understand that, like, they have like happy and basic emotions, but then the more nuanced ones, they mightn't be able to put a word on them. So that's one of the best things of therapy I found, is to just, and Timmy said it too before, just being able to understand what you're feeling and be able to like put a name on it. And once you're aware of something, then you can work towards addressing it.
Yeah,
but,
it takes time though, don't it?
It takes time and effort as well. It's not easy. Like the psychotherapy is not easy. You know, you just, and you need
it can be frustrating as well for somebody.
Or angry. Is that frustration, anger?
It can be frustrating. Like, in what way am I supposed to feel? Like, do you know, this is me now with a coach. I'm like, what do you feel? I don't know. And I used to get very, very angry then, because I was saying, fucking hell, this guy is telling me I should be like, well, I didn't know how to feel, because I was completely shut off for nearly 30 years. And here I am trying to learn all these different fucking ways to feel, and I haven't a clue what he's saying, because I didn't know that language of feelings, the emotion. I didn't know that language. Never mind know what I was feeling. I didn't know the language. All I knew were the basic ones. James said anger, and just completely happy then when I was stoned or whatever, drunk or whatever.
In my experience then, I had kind of more of an understanding around some of the negative emotions, right? When I was in residential treatment for addiction, there was one or two people in there I clashed with. Other people know in addiction too. And when you're in a residential rehab like that, it's like a powder keg for people that are very hurt, and people that are all finding their own way and dealing with their own shit that they've experienced. And when you get 20 people or 12 people in a room, things can sparks fly. So there was this guy who used to really get on my tits, I swear to God. And so the therapist would come to me in a group setting, and he said, James, what do you feel now? I said, I'm annoyed. And say, no, what are you really feeling? Saying frustrated, but I'm annoyed. Because I'd be more of introverted, I think, by nature, and I would repress a lot of that strong emotions, you know. And he says, James, are you fucking angry? And I said, I am angry, you know. And it was then I started to get kind of, I am fucking angry. And they said, oh, you're allowed to be angry, and I do want to fuck. And, you know, in a safe environment like that, you can get it and just get relief from it. And you don't always have to be repressed, you know what I mean? Because when you repress it, it's not good for you. You internalise it. When we had Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate speak at length about repressed emotions and how that affects us physically and emotionally as well, you know.
I think sometimes though, and this is my very, very firm belief on being addicted to alcohol and drugs, you know, because of a lot of people get a lot of different issues because of trauma and stuff like that, health issues and things like that. And I came out of addiction with not one health issue. Mental health issues definitely, but nothing wrong with my body because I never thought of anything but drinking drugs for 20 years. And it was I'm only understanding this now as in one of the main reasons of why I actually wasn't probably physically really unwell internally, you know, like a disease. was because of the drugs, because I actually didn't give myself no time to think about anything.
Because the drugs is a coping mechanism, you know, and if you don't have the drugs, not saying people that have, you know, emotional issues and illnesses should go and take drugs, you know, maybe go see therapists instead might be the better thing to do, but drugs are a coping mechanism, and if they help you get through that period in life, then move on to the therapist. But one thing I wanted to ask you was about, you work with couples. What's it like working with couples? Do you enjoy working with couples, and what kind of issues do couples present to you with?
I do. I think it's really interesting work. Obviously, the more people you have in the room, it always gets more interesting. I think a lot of times, like, it sounds so like kind of classic, but communication is such a big thing. And a big piece of that too is, I think, understanding each other's perspective and what things mean to us, right? So we're talking about like, right, trauma and things like that. If I have a history in my family of violence and aggression and my partner doesn't, and we are in an argument and he raises his voice, to me, danger, right? To me, this is, we're at risk. Something really, really bad is going to happen. To him, it may mean I'm kind of annoyed, right? And so I'm responding as if I am in a serious threat.
Yeah.
I'm making up examples here, right? But, I threaten ending the relationship. I leave, I storm off. I say, I hate you, whatever else. And to him, he's like, we're just having an argument. And she's, going wild about it. And just being able to have two people sit down and recognize, like, what did that mean when I said that? What is the intent of what I'm saying? What was the impact of it? I think very rarely do we talk about those things, right? We get so lost. And this is for all of us, right? That it's so easy to get lost in we separate it, the content and the process. So the content is what we're talking about. The process is how we're talking about it. Content, right? I don't know how many times couples will come to me and we spend an entire session talking about the dishwasher. No one in the room actually cares about the dishwasher. It doesn't matter. I could say one of you legally has to clean the dishes for the rest of your life. Too bad. Doesn't really matter. It's about how they're talking about it. There's so much underneath that of what it means, right? Whether it's power, whether it's talking about fairness, respect, understanding, 1,000,001 things. It just takes the form of dishwasher. Yeah.
Just stuff that's irrelevant. Yeah. Like, it's just the unconscious part of them, each of them trying to run away from the real issues that need to be spoken about. And that's normal behavior for human beings. We'll try every opportunity that's there and reason, and just to get away from the real in-depth stuff that's going to make us feel a little bit uneasy. And but that's the whole part of any form of recovery, is dealing with those uneasy parts of us, and talking about them and setting them free, and even just forgiveness is a massive part of recovery for people. It's about forgiving yourself anyway, for number one. That's the most important thing, is forgiving yourself for whatever you believe you've done, and forgiving everybody else, and just that takes a lot of work. It means you have to be vulnerable. And allow yourself to open up your heart and just leave people in and trust people. And that's a big, big thing for somebody who has had a lot of trauma in their life, had different issues, abuse, physical, mental, sexual, whatever it may have been. It could be really tough, but it is the only way to freedom. It is the only way to live in a fulfilled life, carefree. And it's the only way. It's just, another big word is well related to it, is surrender and acceptance. Surrendering to whatever way you're feeling, and accept whatever situation's gone on for you, if you're powerless over it. If you can change something, fair enough. But if you can't, just keep going. And that's all part of, is it emotional literacy? Is it? That's another big word that I have to say it slowly.
Emotional literacy, emotional expression. I think emotional awareness, right? Just understanding how we feel. That's a big one. I think the episode you had with Gabor Mate was talking about this sort of idea of being friends with these parts of ourselves. And I think that's a huge part. I always talk to people about that with emotions, because they get such a bad rap, right? Anger, fear, all of those things. I don't like them, so I kind of push them away. Spoiler alert, if you push them away, they'll come back at one point or another. And I think if we can be friends with those parts, like every emotion, the way I see it is the point of them is they're telling me a message. So they're actually really, really valuable messengers. And if my fear is trying to tell me a message and I'm pushing that away, it'll just keep shouting until I get the message. And usually by the time it's shouting, I've worked myself up to a level that I think something is much more risky than it is, or dangerous, or whatever else. And all of these emotions, like, they have a purpose and a function. Like I talk about fear. It's a good feeling to have. There's a purpose for that feeling.
Keep you alive.
Yeah. If someone threw a tiger into this room right now, we would all feel anxious.
Hide behind your own.
And correct. We should be feeling anxious. And that's what it's for, right? It's a good and healthy feeling. The problem is emotions, the way they work is they're split-second decisions. So inherently, they will be wrong sometimes. And the practice is saying, I'm friends with this part. And when it shows up, it knows me. It trusts me. So when the fear comes and goes, there's a tiger in a room, I can tell it, I get why you're here. Don't worry, there isn't. And it listens to me, right? I think a lot of times we push those parts away. And then when we're trying to tell it there's not a tiger in the room, it's like, I don't believe you, right? But what if a tiger comes? There might be a tiger. What about behind there? And being friends with these parts means we can take that message, say, thanks. I get why you're anxious. Don't worry, no tiger. Takes time, takes practice.
And it's about consistency.
Yeah.
It's about keep doing it. And the more you keep doing it and bringing it back and bringing it back and bringing it back, it becomes natural.
Yeah.
You know, it's because I know that from my own experience through meditation, I would have just kept on bringing myself back with the compassion. And after a while, then when the head was going off, just during the day, I wouldn't be meditating. It would like, bring it back, feel it, the head, like instead of snowballing with the mad thoughts related to the way I was feeling, fear. If you feel fear, if the thought is related to fear, I feel fear. Then my mind has to think of more fearful thoughts to be able to go with the feeling that I have here. And it just snowballs. And it's so true that you can go through your whole life living like that in complete fear or guilt or shame. If you just keep it, and the stronger and the more you think of it, the stronger and stronger. And it imprints into your brain. You know, it gets so strong. Yeah. You know, these connections really glue together and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the stuff now I would have learned from Dispenza's work. And it really, really made a lot of sense to me. And I was saying, whoa, fuck, that's the way I feel. And, you know, and my life started to change then because of that, you know, so.
Well, I think that's a big piece as you're talking about, like that acceptance, right? Is allowing those things to be there. I think we're so used to fighting them or resisting them that as you're talking about, like they just get stronger and stronger. And there's a story I always tell my clients about me. And I was mentioning this to you guys before we started too. One of the things that brought me to the world of psychology is I was a very, very anxious child. No real reason for it. No circumstance, just me. And I always tell a story to clients because it's funny. And also I think it illustrates the point well of when I was younger, you know, when you're in primary school, got English at 9 o'clock, maths at 10 o'clock, that sort of thing. And I really like schedules and routines and being on time. And at that, whatever day it was, 10 o'clock was maths. I was like, great, I'm going to get my maths notebooks out. Surprise, we're actually having a party. We did really well on something. We had cupcakes, great, exciting. The change of schedule last minute was so stressful for me as a child that I cried so much that my mom had to come collect me. And I always tell it to people because it's a very funny story. But I think it illustrates that really good point of like a good thing happened. So on paper, good thing happened. You should be happy. That anxiety was saying, tiger in the room. Yeah. You got to get out of here. You're not ready for this. And I always talk to people about that because that part, that anxiety is still in me today. So if I am running really late for something, right, or schedules change last minute, there is going to be a part of me that shows up.
And you get a 0.
Yeah. And I know that. And the benefit and the privilege of my work and years of studying all of this is not that I got rid of that part. And I think sometimes people feel to have good mental health, you don't ever feel bad. It's not true. For me, I never will get rid of that part. I think it's just part of who I am.
Just use it to make sure you're on time.
Yeah, that's true. I'm on time for things. And what it also means as well is when that part shows up, it's just that I've got a good enough relationship with it that it trusts me now. So when it shows up now, I say, oh, don't worry. I get why you're here. You don't like this. Oftentimes I talk to clients about being able to say, I don't like this, but I'm not in danger. And being able to trust that. And for me, again, I still have to do that sometimes now where I'll say, you're running late for that thing. Nobody's going to die. And I have to remind myself that. And just for people to know too, like that's all it takes. It's not, I have to magically feel good all the time. It's not, I have to magically never feel stressed or sad or angry. It's just that I'm in a good relationship with them.
Were you able to trace that back? Were you able to trace it back to where you actually got it from, that kind of, that anxiety from the change? And like even change can be a massive big thing for people as well. Like, you know, because when I look at my wife, you know, punctuality is second to none. And then my little boy, Jay, who's 10, the exact same, because their relationship would have been so close growing up. He's has to be there now, and it has to be there. And me then and my daughter are
whatever.
Oh, where's that again? You know, it's like the two of us are complete the same. The two separate fucking kind of like they're there and they're organised, and these two here are fucking pure like scatty and but very kind of what will be grand. We'll do it tomorrow. You know, it's so different. And I suppose what my point was, if you can trace it really back and look at where it came from, and look at the person, it kind of makes a little bit of sense then about how things work in life. And it's not something you were born with, as we said earlier. The child is born. You know, it's an amazing thing that we can trace things back when we get the awareness and the knowledge, isn't it?
It's interesting that you talked about the tiger reference. I remember I was at a talk and I always try to reference people, you know, if I got it from somewhere else, I try and give him credit. But this guy's name is Fergus Heffernan. Now, there was a lot of controversy later on around, you know, some of his PhDs, were they legitimate, blah, blah. But I found it to be a very good talk. But he spoke about that tiger. He spoke about who we evolved from, caveman, right? And the function of the emotions and the feelings. And if you're a hunter-gatherer, so you're out in nature and you're providing for your family and you're gathering, you know, berries and seeds, and you might kill an animal and get the carcass, all these things. Sometimes a bear will come across your path, or a tiger or a lion, and it's fear and it's flight and you're gone, and it's survival, and then you get away, and then you de-stress and you go on about your day. But in this society, we still have those basic functions, but we've that tiger in the room 24 hours of the day sometimes. There's no running away from it. Whether it's bills, it's relationships, it's social media, it's bullying in the workplace, you know, you're in debt. That fear and anxiety can be with you the whole time. And we're so out of touch with nature in city life anyway, that like we start to get all these psychological problems then, because fear, anxiety, nervousness and all this just becomes a part of life, and we don't get that chance to decompress out in nature, you know. So that's when you spoke about the tiger, I remember that talk, you know, and it doesn't make sense because we've so many stressors in our lives today.
It's I think really common in general, and you may have heard the term before, hypervigilance, right? If we've experienced trauma in any form, and if we haven't, in different ways too, hypervigilance is really common in this way that it's looking out for that danger, it's looking out for that tiger all the time, and it's acting as if just in case it's here, I don't see it here, but just in case it's under the table, how will I respond? one of the biggest costs of that is it's exhausting, right? I'm always acting in the same way. If we all right now were trying to record a podcast while a tiger was here, when we finish, all of us will probably sleep for 12 hours because it's exhausting. And it's really, really stressful. And what ends up happening then too is I don't have the ability to distinguish between a thing that I don't like, a thing that isn't good, and a thing that is currently dangerous to me, right? So you mentioned those things, right? That those daily stressors, they absolutely exist. And that's separate from tiger in the room, I'm going to die right now, which means I need to respond to those differently, right? If tiger in the room, we should all get out of here. That's the only thing we care about. Let's go. If I'm struggling with debt, running out of the room actually doesn't do anything.
Solve it.
And usually then what happens is I've run out of the room and the debt's waiting in the other room. I'm not going back to it. Right? I don't want to think about that. And then it builds and I get more stress and I keep running, right? And these things, being able to say, okay, this is a problem, this is an issue, this is a stressor, but I can stay in the room. It's really hard to learn to distinguish that from tiger in the room. It takes time and it takes practice. And I think, again, that's where it takes knowing yourself too, right? And being able to talk yourself through, I'm safe right now. I really, really don't like this thing I'm looking at, but I'm safe. I can stay here, both physically, right? And mentally, I can stay in the room. Easier said than done, of course.
But human beings, they rest with that uneasy feeling. Like, say, for instance, there's a lion going after a gazelle. The gazelle will bolt. Fight or flight. It will bolt. It'll be gone. Right? 2 minutes later, that gazelle will be in the corner eating grass. Chilled. The stress is gone completely down. They're grand. They're not thinking about the tiger anymore. But us as human beings, we tend to hold on to stuff and sit with that feeling of whatever it may be, and we're kind of crippled with fear, guilt.
But you know, if you had that gazelle that got chased by a lion, right, and the gazelle gets away and the gazelle is eating grass, imagine how that gazelle is on Facebook getting a lot of abuse off the antelope and the cheetah wants to get stuck in him. I know that's what a human is like. Like, we get away from one problem, you open your phone, there's another 30 people waiting for you, there's emails, there's bills, that's the problem. You know, and that's, I don't know, that's what I see as you know, a big problem in what differentiates us from animals.
I think a different, now I'm not a zoologist, so I don't know about gazelles in particular, but another piece of this,
a very elegant animal by all accounts.
And I think the idea of a gazelle, it's running away when it sees danger, and when it doesn't see danger, it goes, okay, there's no danger. Whereas for me, I can go, what if the lion's over there, right? Or what if I have to go into work tomorrow. Was the lion going to be there? And I can start thinking about it. I'm sure you guys may or may not have experienced. I know I have. When the anxiety's really kicking, right? It starts running through ridiculous scenarios. A lot of people talk to me about, right? For most people, anxiety will peak. It will peak over the day, but it peaks usually right before bed for people. And I know for myself, there's things I worry about that I say, oh my gosh, you have to email that person. They must be so upset with you. And I'll wake up in the morning and go, what are you talking about? Like, you could just email them today. It doesn't mean anything. But at that time, and I'm not sure if you're aware too of the biology of all of this, but when we are emotionally flooded, what's happening in our brain. Now it's more complex than this, right? But our cortisol levels go up, our adrenaline levels go up. That's that fight or flight or freeze response that's happening. What's happening sort of in our brain is our emotion center is really, really active. That's also our aggression center. That's where the fight or flight comes from. That's why oftentimes people will get into fights when stressed. That center gets activated because our brains like to conserve energy. They lower the activity in what's called our prefrontal cortex, basically the logic part of your brain. So for all of us here talking, when we are stressed, if you take a scan of our brains, very, very simplified, we are all heightened emotionally and not thinking very logically. Every single one of us, which means that's why when I'm anxious, I have thoughts that when I am relaxed, I go, what was that? That was ridiculous, right? That was a wild thought, or I was in an argument with someone. I'm like, why was I arguing about that? I actually meant this thing or whatever else. Biologically, we can't access that logic. We have to get that sort of back online before we can ask ourselves to be the gazelle chomping away.
And you cannot retain any form of information at that state of being because I know it.
Turned off.
Yeah.
Completely. When it's like the brain frequencies, you have the 3 layers of beta brainwave frequencies, and when you're at 3, which is the fight or flight, you are completely, you can't retain anything at all. You can't take in any information. You can't even focus. It's just like you're constantly on edge because the adrenaline is running through your body. You know.
If people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
You can find me. Website is lakeshoretherapy.org. I'm on Instagram and I'm horrible at it. You're talking about social media. I'm miserable at it. But I'm at Lakeshore Dublin if you want to get in touch there too.
Is that where you're based?
Yeah.
Brilliant. And we'll link all your website in the description of the video and the podcast on Acast, Spotify, Apple, etc. It's been lovely talking
Thank you for having
to you.
me.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much.
And safe journey home.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
God
Thanks,
bless.
Millie.
Thanks.
Shit.